poor girl agreed to be the CEO's contract wife for money, but his daughter called her mom right away. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome to your safe place, Mr. Peter Stories. Before we go anywhere today, let me hold your heart for a moment. You are loved, not just by me, but by the universe that brought you here. You are not a number. You are a name, a soul, a light. And if you can feel even a little bit of that love right now, comment, "I am here," and like this video, not for me, but for the bond we share. I never want you to think I take you for granted. I don't. You are my miracle. Your presence gives my stories meaning. Your love gives my voice strength. When I think of family, I think of you. Every single one of you. If your heart is tired, if your days feel heavy, if no one has asked how you are, please know this: I care deeply, and I always will. Now, take this prayer like a blanket around your soul. May light find you when you feel lost. May joy rise within you, even when your smile feels far away. May your home be safe, your body be strong, and your mind be still. May love chase away your loneliness, and peace wrap around your spirit like a mother's arms. And may you never forget, not even for a second, how much you are cherished by the one who's speaking to you now. Let's begin, together, as one heart, one family, forever. The fluorescent hospital lights hummed overhead like dying insects, casting everything in that sickly blue-white glow that made even healthy people look like corpses. Julia Davis had been sitting in the same plastic chair for 8 hours straight, her cramped hand wrapped around her brother's cold fingers, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest, each labored breath a small miracle she no longer dared take for granted. At 19, Jamie should have been starting his sophomore year at State, probably majoring in engineering like he'd always dreamed, maybe dating that sweet girl from his high school calculus class. Instead, he lay unconscious in this sterile room, his once athletic body reduced to skin and bones by the leukemia that was devouring him from the inside out. The experimental treatment, their final desperate hope, cost $500,000. It might as well have been $5 billion for all the chance Julia had of raising it. She traced the back of his hand with her thumb, remembering when. These same hands used to ruffle her hair when she was little, when he'd taught her to throw a baseball in their tiny backyard, when he'd held her while she cried after their parents' funeral 5 years ago. He'd been her rock, her protector, her everything. And now she was failing him when he needed her most. "I'm so sorry, Jamie," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "I tried everything. I sold Mom's ring, Dad's tools, everything we had left. I worked 3 jobs until my hands bled, but it's not enough. It's never enough." The papers sat on the bedside table like a death sentence, the forms to discontinue life support. The doctors had been gentle but clear, without the experimental treatment. Jamie had days, maybe a week left. The insurance wouldn't cover it. The hospital couldn't wait any longer for payment they knew would never come. Julia's vision blurred with fresh tears as she picked up the pen. Her hand shook so violently, she could barely hold it. How do you sign away the life of the only family you have left? How do you tell the person who saved you that you couldn't save them back? "I love you so much," she choked out, pressing her forehead against their joined hands. "I love you so much, and I'm so sorry I couldn't be stronger, couldn't fight harder. You deserved better than me." She stood on unsteady legs, needing coffee, needing air, needing anything to give her the strength to come back and sign those papers. The hospital cafe was nearly empty at 4 in the morning, just a few exhausted medical staff grabbing quick caffeine fixes between emergencies that would determine if families stayed whole or shattered completely. Julia fumbled with her last. $5, hands still trembling as she tried to count out exact change for a coffee that would taste like ash in her mouth. She was so tired, so broken, so utterly defeated that she didn't see the man standing behind her until she turned and walked straight into his chest. The coffee flew everywhere, across his expensive suit, onto the floor, splashing both of them, with liquid that burned almost as much as the shame flooding through her. Oh God, oh no, I'm so sorry. Julia dropped to her knees immediately, trying to clean up the mess with thin cafe napkins that only smeared the liquid around. I'm so sorry. I'll pay for your suit. But she couldn't finish the sentence because she was crying again. Great heaving sobs that came from somewhere so deep inside her that she couldn't stop them. I'm sorry, she kept repeating, the words becoming a mantra of all her failures. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry for everything. Ben Abler had been in this same hospital for 3 hours, not for any medical emergency, but because his lawyer had called an emergency meeting here, neutral ground where his ex-wife Miranda couldn't cause a scene. The custody evaluation report was damning. Single father, demanding job, no female influence in the home. The court-appointed psychologist had practically written Lily's custody over to Miranda already, despite the fact that she'd abandoned them both without a backward glance. He'd been walking to grab coffee before facing another round of legal discussions about his daughter's future when this woman, this broken, beautiful woman, had crashed into him. But it wasn't the coffee or the ruined suit that stopped him cold. It was the sound she made when she hit the floor, a sound of someone who had been pushed past their breaking point and was free-falling into despair. Ben knelt beside her without thinking, his hands hovering over her shaking shoulders. She was tiny, probably hadn't eaten a decent meal in weeks, wearing scrubs that had seen better days and shoes held together with duct tape. But it was her eyes when she finally looked up at him that nearly broke his heart. Brown eyes filled with such profound grief and exhaustion that he recognized it instantly. He'd seen the same look in his own mirror every morning since Miranda left. Hey, it's okay," he said softly, his voice gentler than it had been in months. "It's just coffee. It's just a suit." But Julia shook her head violently, still trying to clean up the mess. "You don't understand. I can't afford to replace it. I can't afford anything. I can't even afford to save." Her voice broke completely, and she buried her face in her hands, her whole body shaking with the force of her sobs. Something in Ben's chest cracked open. He'd spent so long focused on his own pain, his own failures, that he'd forgotten other people were drowning too. Without hesitation, he sat down on the dirty cafe floor and gently pulled her hands away from her face. "What's your name?" he asked. Quietly. "Julia," she whispered, mortified by her breakdown in front of a stranger. "Julia, I'm Ben, and I think we might be able to help each other." She looked at him like he was speaking a foreign language. Help each other? She had nothing to offer anyone, least of all this man in his $1,000 suit, who radiated success and stability, everything she wasn't. "My brother is dying," she said simply, because what else was there to say? "Leukemia. There's a treatment. That could save him, but it costs $500,000, and I don't have it. I've tried everything. I'm about to go sign papers to let him go because I can't save him, and he's the only family I have left, and what if I paid?" "For the treatment?" Ben said quietly. Julia's breath caught. "What? What if I paid for your brother's treatment, covered all the medical bills, made sure he gets the best care possible?" Julia stared at him, certain she was hallucinating from exhaustion and grief. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Ben was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. She had the kind of beauty that came from strength rather than perfection. High cheekbones, sharp with weight loss, full lips that probably smiled easily when her world wasn't falling apart, and those eyes that held depths of compassion despite all the pain she'd endured. "Because I have a 6-year-old daughter named Lily," he said finally, "and my ex-wife abandoned us both 6 months ago. The courts are going to give her custody because they think a little girl needs a mother, even a mother who walked away without looking back. I need a wife, Julia. Someone who can love Lily the way she deserves to be loved. Someone who can help me prove that our home is stable and full of love. Julia's heart stopped. You want me to marry you? A contract marriage. 1 year. You'd live in my house, be Lily's mother figure for the custody proceedings, and in return, I pay for Jamie's treatment and anything else you need. When the year is up and custody is settled, you're free to go with enough money to start whatever life you want. Julia felt like she was drowning and being offered a life raft, but she was too scared to reach for it. I don't understand. You could have anyone. Why me? Ben reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Because 30 seconds ago, you were ready to sacrifice everything for someone you love. Because you're sitting on a dirty hospital floor, crying over spilled coffee, and worried about my suit instead of your own problems. Because something in your eyes tells me you understand what it means to fight for family. He paused, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. And because I think we're both drowning, Julia, maybe together we can learn to breathe again. Julia looked into his eyes and saw the same desperation, the same bone-deep exhaustion she felt. Two broken people reaching for each other in the dark. If I say yes, she whispered, what happens to us when the year is over? Ben's thumb traced her cheek again, and for a moment, she leaned into the touch. The first gentle contact she'd had in longer than she could remember. I don't know, he admitted. But right now, Jamie gets to live, Lily gets to stay with her father, and maybe we both get a chance to remember what hope feels like. Julia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. When she opened them again, she saw something that made her breath catch. Ben was looking at her like she was already precious to him, like she was worth saving too. Okay, she breathed. Yes, I'll marry you. Chapter 2. A Daughter's Prayer Answered. Julia stood in the circular driveway of what could only be described as a mansion, clutching 2 garbage bags that contained everything she owned in the world. Her breath formed small clouds in the cool, evening air as she stared up at the massive stone and glass structure before her, a home so beautiful and imposing it looked like something from Architectural Digest. The manicured gardens, the 3-car garage, the soaring windows that glowed warmly from within, all of it spoke of a life so far removed from her own experience that she felt like an alien visitor from another planet. Julia stood in the circular driveway of what could only be described as a mansion, clutching 2 garbage bags that contained everything she owned in the world. Her breath formed small clouds in the cool evening air as she stared up at the massive stone and glass structure before her. A home so beautiful and imposing it looked like something from Architectural Digest. The manicured gardens, the 3-car garage, the soaring windows that glowed warmly from within, all of it spoke of a life so far removed from her own experience that she felt like an alien visitor from another planet. For a moment, panic clawed at her throat. What was she doing here? What had she agreed to? She was a woman who'd been scrubbing office floors for minimum wage just yesterday, and now she was supposed to be the wife of one of the city's most successful men, the mother to his precious daughter. The weight of the house key in her palm felt impossibly heavy, like it might drag her straight through the earth. The front door opened before she could knock, revealing Ben in jeans and a casual sweater that somehow made him look even more handsome than he had in his expensive suit. His dark hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and there were lines of exhaustion around his green eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and endless worry. "Julia," he said softly, and something in the way he said her name, like it mattered, like she mattered, made her chest tight with emotion. "Welcome home." Home. The word hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't had a real home since her parents died. just a string of cramped apartments and temporary spaces that never felt safe or permanent. But something about the way Ben said it, the warmth in his voice, made her want to believe it could be true. "I know it's a lot," Ben continued, taking her bags without being asked. "We can start with a tour if you want, but there's someone very important I'd like you to meet first." As if summoned by his words, a small voice called from somewhere inside the house. "Daddy? Is she here? Is my new mommy here?" Julia's breath caught in her throat. "My new mommy." The words were spoken with such hope, such innocent expectation, that tears immediately sprang to her eyes. She'd known intellectually that Ben had a daughter, that part of their arrangement involved her acting as a mother figure. But hearing those words from a child's lips made it suddenly, devastatingly real. "She's here, sweetheart," Ben called back, his own voice slightly thick with emotion. "Come meet Julia." The sound of small feet running across hardwood floors echoed through the foyer, and then she appeared. 6-year-old Lily Abler, and she was absolutely perfect. Blonde curls that caught the light like spun gold, bright blue eyes that were exact copies of her father's, and a gap-toothed smile that could have powered the entire city. She wore pink pajamas covered in unicorns and clutched a worn teddy bear to her chest. But it was the hope in her expression that nearly broke Julia's heart, the desperate, careful hope of a child who had been disappointed before, but couldn't stop herself from wishing anyway. "Hi," Lily said shyly, suddenly uncertain now that the moment was here. "Are you really going to be my mommy?" Julia knelt down to Lily's eye level, her heart hammering against her ribs. How do you explain a contract marriage to a 6-year-old? How do you tell a child that you're essentially an actress playing a role in her life? But looking into those innocent blue eyes, Julia found she couldn't think about contracts or arrangements or temporary situations. All she could think about was this beautiful little girl who had been abandoned by the woman who should have loved her most. "I'm Julia," she said gently, "and I would be honored to be your mommy, if you'll have me." Lily's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? You really want to be my mommy, even though I'm not your real daughter?" The question hit Julia like a sledgehammer to the chest. She glanced up at Ben, who was watching the interaction with barely contained emotion, his hands clenched at his sides like he was fighting not to reach for both of them. "Oh, sweetheart," Julia whispered, reaching out to gently touch Lily's cheek. "Being someone's real mommy has nothing to do with biology. It's about loving them so much that their happiness becomes more important than your own. It's about being there when they're scared, celebrating when they're happy, and loving them no matter what. And I can already tell that loving you is going to be the easiest thing I've ever done." Lily's teddy bear dropped to the floor as she launched herself into Julia's arms with such force that they both nearly toppled over. Tiny arms wrapped around Julia's neck with desperate strength, and she felt hot tears against her shoulder as Lily whispered, "I prayed for a mommy every single night. I asked God to send me someone who would love me and not leave me like she did." Julia's vision blurred as she held this precious child against her heart, feeling something deep inside her chest crack open and bleed. She'd never wanted children of her own. How could she when she barely had enough to take care of Jamie? But holding Lily felt like finding a piece of herself she hadn't known was missing. "I'm not going anywhere, baby girl," Julia whispered fiercely, pressing her lips to the top of Lily's head. "I promise you, I'm not going anywhere." Ben watched his daughter cling to Julia like a lifeline, watched Julia hold her with the fierce protectiveness of a mother bear, and felt his carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. He'd expected this to be awkward, complicated, full of careful negotiations and boundaries. He hadn't expected to fall a little bit in love with Julia Davis just from watching her love his daughter. "Can you help me get ready for bed?" Lily asked, pulling back to look at Julia with shining eyes. Daddy tries, but he's not very good at braids, and he doesn't know any lullabies. I would love to, Julia said, standing and taking Lily's hand. What's your bedtime routine? Bath. Then Daddy reads me a story. Then Lily's voice trailed off and she looked suddenly sad. Then I try to go to sleep, but sometimes I get scared and have bad dreams about her leaving again. Julia squeezed Lily's hand gently. Well, maybe we can come up with some new bedtime traditions. Would you like that? Lily nodded eagerly, and Ben watched them walk up the stairs together, his heart doing complicated things in his chest. This was supposed to be a business arrangement, a practical solution to both their problems. So why did watching Julia naturally slip into the role of Lily's mother feel like watching his family finally become complete? An hour later, Ben climbed the stairs to check on bedtime progress and found himself stopping outside Lily's door, transfixed by the sound of Julia's voice, singing softly. It was a lullaby he'd never heard before, something gentle and sweet about stars, watching over sleeping children, and love that never fades. He peered around the doorframe and felt his breath catch. Julia sat on the edge of Lily's bed, gently stroking his daughter's freshly braided hair while she sang. Lily's eyes were already drooping, her face peaceful in a way Ben hadn't seen since Miranda left. Is that a special song? Lily murmured sleepily. It's a song my mama used to sing to me when I was little, Julia said softly. She told me it was magic, that as long as someone who loves you sings it, you'll always be safe in your dreams. Will you sing it to me every night? Every single night, sweetheart, I promise. And you'll be here when I wake up? Julia's voice caught slightly. I'll be here forever and ever. Ben held his breath, knowing Julia couldn't promise forever when their arrangement had an expiration date. But Julia leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to Lily's forehead. For as long as you need me, baby girl, that's a mommy promise. Lily's eyes fluttered closed, her breathing evening out as sleep claimed her. Julia continued stroking her hair for a few more minutes, her own eyes bright with unshed tears as she looked down at this precious child who had chosen to trust her with her whole heart. When Julia finally stood and turned toward the door, she found Ben standing there watching them, his expression unreadable but intense. They stepped into the hallway together, pulling Lily's door closed behind them. She's incredible, Julia whispered, wiping at her eyes. Ben, she's absolutely perfect. She likes you, Ben said quietly. She hasn't let anyone get that close since Miranda left. You're good with her, natural. Julia felt heat climb her neck. I've never been around children much, but she's so easy to love. How could anyone walk away from her? Something dark flashed across Ben's face. Miranda said motherhood wasn't what she expected. Said she felt trapped, suffocated. She left while Lily was at school one day. Just packed her things and left a note saying she wasn't cut out for family life. I'm sorry, Julia said, meaning it. I can't imagine. She must have been in a lot of pain to walk away from something so beautiful. Ben studied her face, surprised by her compassion for the woman who had shattered his daughter's world. You're nothing like her, he said finally. Nothing at all. They stood in the hallway outside Lily's room, suddenly aware that they were alone together in this house that was supposed to be their temporary shared space. The intimacy of the evening, watching Julia put his daughter to bed, seeing them, a bond so naturally, had shifted something between them. I should show you to your room, Ben said, his voice rougher than before. Julia nodded, following him down the hall to a beautiful guest suite with its own bathroom and sitting area. It was larger than any apartment she'd ever lived in, with French doors that opened onto a balcony ovi. They stood in the hallway outside Lily's room, suddenly aware that they were alone together in this house that was supposed to be their temporary shared space. The intimacy of the evening, watching Julia put his daughter to bed, seeing them bond so naturally, had shifted something between them. I should show you to your room, Ben said, his voice rougher than before. Julia nodded, following him down the hall to a beautiful guest suite with its own bathroom and sitting area. It was larger than any apartment she'd ever lived in, with French doors that opened onto a balcony overlooking gardens she couldn't quite see in the darkness. "If you need anything," Ben said, lingering in the doorway, "anything at all, my room is just down the hall." "Thank you," Julia said softly, "for all of this, for saving Jamie, for trusting me with Lily, for giving me a chance to be part of something beautiful." Ben's green eyes were intense as they searched her face. "Thank you for giving her what I couldn't, a mother's love." After he left, Julia sat on the edge of the enormous bed and finally let herself cry. But for the first time in years, they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of gratitude, of hope, of the overwhelming realization that sometimes the most broken people find each other and somehow manage to create something whole. Down the hall, Ben lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of his house settling around them. For the first time since Miranda left, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt full of possibilities he was afraid to name, and in her room, Julia fell asleep, still hearing Lily's whispered, "I prayed for a mommy every night," finally understanding that maybe, just maybe, they had all been answers to each other's prayers. Chapter 3. Learning to trust again. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Julia had developed a routine that felt almost normal. Almost. She woke before dawn to make Ben's coffee exactly how he liked it. 2 sugars, splash of cream. Packed Lily's lunch with encouraging notes tucked between the sandwich and apple, and tried to ignore the way her heart raced every time Ben smiled at her across the breakfast table. But at 2 a.m. on a Thursday, that carefully constructed normalcy shattered. Julia woke to the sound of muffled sobbing coming from somewhere downstairs. She lay still for a moment, her heart clenching when she realized it was Ben. Something was devastatingly wrong. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floors as she followed the heartbroken sounds to his study. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack she could see him hunched over his massive oak desk, shoulders shaking as he stared at something in his hands. A half-empty bottle of Macallan sat beside him. Ben, who never drank more than a single glass of wine with dinner. Julia hesitated. In the 3 weeks she'd been living here, they'd maintained careful boundaries. Polite conversations over breakfast, coordinated schedules around Lily's needs, pleasant but distant interactions that felt more like roommates than husband and wife. But hearing Ben cry, this strong, composed man who seemed to have everything under control, shattered something inside her chest. She knocked softly and pushed the door open. "Ben, are you okay?" He looked up with red-rimmed eyes, and she saw he was holding a photograph, a picture of Lily as a baby, her tiny fist wrapped around his finger. His face was ravaged with grief and something that looked like terror. "I'm sorry," he said roughly, wiping at his eyes with his free hand. "I didn't mean to wake you. I couldn't sleep." Julia stepped into the room without being invited, closing the door behind her. "What's wrong? Did something happen with the custody case?" Ben let out a bitter laugh that had no humor in it. "The custody evaluation is next week. Lily's therapist will interview her, ask her about our home life, whether she feels safe and loved here." He looked down at the photo again, his voice breaking. "What if I'm not enough? What if they take her anyway?" Julia's heart clenched at the raw vulnerability in his voice. This was the fear that kept him up at night, the terror that lived beneath his controlled exterior. She moved closer, her bare feet silent on the thick carpet. "Ben, look at me." When he raised his eyes to hers, she was struck by how young he looked in his pain, how utterly lost. "You are an incredible father," she said firmly. "I've watched you." With her, you make her breakfast every morning, pancakes shaped like hearts because they make her smile. You know exactly which voice to use for every character in her bedtime stories. You've never missed a goodnight kiss, even when you're exhausted. You love her with everything you have. But what if it's not enough? Ben whispered. What if they think she needs more than I can give her? Miranda had advantages. Family money, social connections, a mother's intuition that I'll never have. What if they're right? What if Lily would be better off? Stop. Julia's voice was sharp with conviction. Don't you dare doubt yourself like that. Lily doesn't need advantages or social connections or family money. She needs someone who will love her unconditionally, who will protect her, who will be there when she's scared or hurt or happy. She needs you, Ben. She needs her daddy. Ben stared at her, something shifting in his expression. How do you do that? Do what? Make me believe things might actually be okay. Julia felt heat creep up her neck. Without thinking, she moved around the desk and gently took the photograph from his hands, setting it down before reaching for him. Ben looked surprised when she pulled him into her arms, but he didn't resist. He buried his face against her shoulder, and she felt the exact moment he stopped fighting his emotions and let himself break. She held him while he sobbed, deep, wrenching sounds that seemed to come from his soul. Her hands stroked his hair, his back, offering comfort the only way she knew how. He clung to her like she was an anchor in a storm, and she realized with startling clarity that this broken, vulnerable man felt as lost as she did. I'm scared, he admitted against her shoulder. I'm terrified that I'm going to fail her the way I failed at everything else. You didn't fail at anything, Julia whispered fiercely. Your ex-wife failing to appreciate what she had doesn't make you a failure. It makes her a fool. Ben pulled back to look at her, his green eyes searching her face in the dim light. Why do you care so much? This is just a contract to you, a way to save your brother. You don't owe me comfort. Julia's breath caught. The truth was, it had stopped. Being just a contract the moment Lily called her mommy. The moment she'd seen how Ben loved his daughter, the moment she'd realized that she was falling for both of them, despite every self-protective instinct she had. Because you're a good man who deserves to be happy, she said instead. Because Lily deserves to stay with her father. And because I care about you. Both of you. The admission hung between them, loaded with implications neither of them was ready to face. Ben's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone. Julia, he said softly, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. She should step back. She should maintain the boundaries they'd established. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed at the first gentle contact she'd had in longer than she could remember. We shouldn't, she whispered, but she didn't move away. I know, Ben said, his voice rough with want and restraint. But God help me, I want to. His forehead touched hers, and they stayed like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, hearts racing, teetering on the edge of something that would change everything. The sound of small feet in the hallway broke the spell. They sprang apart just as Lily appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes sleepily. I had a bad dream, she said in a small voice. Can I sleep with you and Daddy tonight, Mommy? Julia's heart clenched at the casual way Lily called her Mommy, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She glanced at Ben, who was struggling to compose himself. Of course, baby girl, Julia said, opening her arms. Lily ran to her immediately, and Julia lifted her up, settling her on her hip. What was your dream about? The mean lady came back and took me away from you and Daddy, Lily said, burying her face in Julia's neck. She said I wasn't allowed to have a mommy who loved me. Julia's eyes met Ben's over Lily's head, both of them understanding the deeper implications. Even in sleep, Lily was processing the fear that her new family might be taken away. That was just a dream, sweetheart, Ben said gently, moving to stroke Lily's hair. No one is going to take you away from us. Promise? Lily asked, lifting her head to look between them. We promise, Julia said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. You're stuck with us, whether you like it or not. Lily giggled, the sound chasing away some of the tension in the room. I like it, I like it a lot. They made their way upstairs together, Julia carrying Lily while Ben walked beside them. When they reached the master bedroom, Julia hesitated. She'd never been in Ben's private space before, and suddenly the intimacy of sharing a bed, even with Lily between them, felt overwhelming. But Lily was already reaching for her father, and Ben was pulling back the covers, and somehow Julia found herself sliding into the king-sized bed. Lily curled between them like she belonged there. "Tell me a story," Lily whispered in the darkness. "What kind of story?" Julia asked softly. "A story about a little girl who got the best mommy and daddy in the whole world." Julia's throat tightened with emotion. "Once upon a time," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "there was a little princess who lived in a beautiful castle with her brave, strong daddy who loved her more than all the stars in the sky." As she continued the story, weaving a tale of love and family and forever after, she was aware of Ben's eyes on her in the darkness. Lily's breathing gradually evened out between them, but neither adult moved to leave or suggest that Julia return to her own room. "Thank you," Ben said quietly when he was sure Lily was asleep. "For what?" "For being exactly what she needed. What we both needed." Julia turned her head to look at him across the space where Lily slept peacefully. In the moonlight streaming through the windows, his face was soft with gratitude and something deeper that made her pulse race. "Ben," she whispered. "I know," he said quietly. "I feel it too." They didn't say what it was, the growing connection between them, the way their fake marriage was starting to feel real, the dangerous territory they were entering where contracts and arrangements became secondary to genuine emotion. "What happens when the year is up?" Julia asked, voicing the fear that had been growing stronger every day. Ben was quiet for so long that she thought he might have fallen asleep. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw with honesty. "I don't know, but I know I don't want to find out. Not anymore." Julia's heart hammered against her ribs. "Ben, sleep, Julia," he said softly. "We'll figure it out, somehow." She closed, her eyes hyper-aware of his presence just feet away, of Lily sleeping trustingly between them, of the fact that this felt more like home than anywhere she'd ever lived. As she drifted off to sleep, she allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, what it would be like if this wasn't temporary, if they were a real family bound by love instead of contracts. But even in her dreams, she couldn't quite believe that someone like Ben could truly want someone like her for more than a business arrangement. Some fairy tales, she reminded herself, were too good to be true. Across the bed, Ben lay awake long after both his girls had fallen asleep, watching them in the moonlight and realizing with stunning clarity that he was falling in love with Julia Davis. The woman who had saved his daughter's heart was stealing his own, one gentle touch and fierce declaration at a time. And for the first time since signing their contract, he wondered if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life, not in marrying her, but in putting an expiration date on something that was beginning to feel infinite. Chapter 4, When Love Becomes Protection. Julia was loading groceries into her car outside Patterson's Market when she heard the voice that still haunted her nightmares. The voice that had once whispered sweet promises before delivering devastating blows. Well, well. Look what we have here. Every muscle in her body turned to stone. She didn't need to turn around to know who was standing behind her. Marcus Williams, the man who had spent 2 years methodically destroying her self-worth. With his fists, his words, his relentless psychological warfare. The man she'd fled from 8 months ago, using the last of her savings to disappear completely into the anonymous crowds of the city. But apparently, she hadn't disappeared nearly well enough. "Hello, Julia." His voice carried that same deceptively gentle tone he'd always used right before the violence started, soft as silk and twice as dangerous. "Miss me, sweetheart?" Julia's hands shook as she continued loading bags of groceries, her mind frantically cataloging escape routes. Lily was safe at soccer practice with her team. Thank God she wasn't here. Ben was in back-to-back client meetings until 6. No one knew where she was. No one was coming to help her. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said quietly, not turning around, trying to make her voice steady despite the terror crawling up her throat. "I think you have me confused with someone else." Marcus laughed, the sound making her skin crawl. "Oh, I don't think so, baby. You look good. Better than you did when you were with me. Must be all that money you're spending on yourself instead of helping the people who actually need it." Julia's stomach lurched. He knew. Somehow, he knew about Ben, about their arrangement, about the money. "I saw the news coverage of your fancy wedding," Marcus continued, moving closer until she could feel his presence behind her. "Julia Davis becomes Mrs. Benjamin Abler. Quite the upgrade from your old life, isn't it? Though I have to wonder what your rich husband would think if he knew the truth about his new wife." Julia finally turned around, her heart hammering against her ribs. Marcus looked exactly the same, tall, wiry, with cold grey eyes and the kind of smile that never reached them. But there was something different about him now, something hungrier and more desperate that terrified her. "What do you want, Marcus?" "What I've always wanted from you, sweetheart. Respect and compensation for all the time I wasted trying to make something out of nothing." His smile turned predatory. "See, I've had some financial difficulties lately. Lost my job, got evicted from my apartment. But then I saw you on the society pages, living in that mansion, wearing expensive clothes, and I thought, Marcus, your ex-girlfriend owes you." "I don't owe you anything," Julia said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Marcus's expression darkened instantly, the charming mask slipping to reveal the monster underneath. "Don't you dare talk back to me," he snarled, grabbing her wrist hard enough to make her gasp. "You think because you found some rich fool to take care of you that you're better than me now? You think you can just walk away and pretend our history doesn't exist?" Julia tried to pull away, but his grip tightened, his fingers digging into the exact spot where he used to grab her, where she'd had bruises for months. The familiar panic started to rise in her chest, the same suffocating terror that had kept her trapped with him for 2 years. "Please," she whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. "You're hurting me." "I haven't even started hurting you," Marcus said, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper she remembered too well. "But I could be persuaded to leave you alone for the right price." "I don't have any money." Marcus's grip tightened until she cried out, "Don't lie to me. Your husband is worth millions. You can spare 50,000 to make your past disappear. Unless you'd prefer I tell him about us, about how you used to beg me to stop, about how pathetic you were, about all the times you said you deserved everything I gave you." Julia's vision started to blur with panic and remembered pain. She was 28 years old, but in that moment, she felt like the broken 24-year-old who had believed she deserved to be hurt, who had been so isolated and beaten down that she couldn't see any way out. "Mommy!" The sound of Lily's voice cut through Julia's panic like a knife. She turned to see Ben's car pulling into the parking lot, Lily waving excitedly from the passenger seat. They must have finished early. "I'll come to find her." "Well, isn't this sweet?" Marcus said, his grip still bruising on Julia's wrist. "The happy family. Does the little girl know she's got a fake mommy? Does Daddy know his wife is damaged goods?" Something fierce and protective flared in Julia's chest. Marcus could hurt her. He'd done it before and would probably do it again. But he would not hurt Lily, not ever. "Let go of me," she said, her voice stronger now. "Now!" But Marcus only smiled, his grip tightening as Ben parked and got out of the car. "Smile and wave, sweetheart. Wouldn't want to worry your new family." Ben took one look at the scene, Julia's pale face, the way she was standing rigid and still, the man gripping her wrist, and something primitive and deadly awakened in his chest. He'd never considered himself a violent man, but in that moment, Looking at his wife's terrified face, he understood exactly what rage felt like. "Daddy, why does Mommy look scared?" Lily asked, still in her car seat. "Stay in the car, baby girl," Ben said quietly, his voice deadly calm. "Don't get out no matter what happens." He walked toward them with predatory grace, every muscle in his body coiled for violence. The closer he got, the clearer Julia's situation became. The bruising grip on her wrist, the tears in her eyes, the way she was holding herself like someone expecting to be hit. "Take your hands off my wife," Ben said, his voice so cold it could have frozen fire. Marcus looked up with that same full smile, but Julia could see the calculation in his eyes as he sized up Ben, taller, broader, clearly in excellent physical condition. "Just having a friendly conversation with an old friend," Marcus said easily, but he didn't let go of Julia's wrist. "Julia and I go way back, don't we, sweetheart?" Ben's eyes flicked to Julia's face, saw the terror there, the shame, the way she was shaking. Understanding hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just any ex-boyfriend. This was the man who had hurt her, who had left scars deeper than any physical wound. "I said, let go of her." Ben's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but there was murder in it. "Or what?" Marcus challenged, his grip tightening until Julia whimpered. "You'll call the police? Tell them what? That I'm talking to my ex-girlfriend?" Ben moved faster than Julia had ever seen anyone move. One moment Marcus was holding her wrist, the next he was on the ground with Ben's hand around his throat, his face pressed against the asphalt of the parking lot. "I'll tell them you assaulted my wife," Ben said conversationally, though his eyes were black with rage. "I'll tell them you threatened her, that I feared for her safety and the safety of my child. And then, while you're sitting in jail waiting for bail you can't afford, I'll destroy you. I'll make sure you can never get another job, never rent another apartment, never have a moment's peace for the rest of your miserable life." Marcus struggled beneath him, but Ben's grip was iron. "You don't know who you're messing with," Marcus gasped. "No," Ben said quietly. "You don't know who you're messing with. I'm Benjamin Abler. I have more lawyers than you have brain cells, more money than you'll see in 10 lifetimes, and more connections than you can imagine. But most importantly, I have something you clearly never did, the love and loyalty of an incredible woman, and I will burn the world down before I let anyone hurt her again." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Marcus could hear. "If you ever, and I mean ever, come near my wife or my daughter again, if you so much as think about them, I will find you. And when I do, what happens to you will make whatever you did to Julia look like a gentle caress. Do we understand each other?" Marcus nodded frantically, his face turning red from lack of oxygen. Ben released him and stood, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling the police. You have about 30 seconds to disappear before they get here. If I were you, I'd use those. 30 seconds to start running and never stop." Marcus scrambled to his feet, shooting venomous looks at both of them. "This isn't over," he snarled. "Yes," Ben said calmly, "it is." Marcus stumbled away, and Ben immediately turned to Julia, who was standing frozen, cradling her bruised wrist against her chest. She was staring at him with a mixture of awe and terror, like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. "Julia," he said softly, approaching her like she was a wounded animal. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" The endearment broke something inside her. She started to nod, started to say she was fine, the automatic response she'd learned with Marcus. But then she looked into Ben's eyes and saw something she'd never seen before. Genuine concern, protective fury on her behalf. "Love," she broke. The sobs came from somewhere deep inside her, years of suppressed pain and terror and shame pouring out all at once. Ben caught her as her knees gave out, gathering her against his chest and holding her while she shattered. "He used to hit me," she gasped between sobs, "every day for 2 years. He said I deserved it, that I was worthless, that no one would ever love me. I believed him. God help me, I believed him." Ben's arms tightened around her, his own eyes filling with tears at her confession. "Baby, no," he whispered against her hair. None of that was true. None of it. I ran away 6 months ago, used the last of my money to disappear. I thought I was safe. I thought, "You are safe," Ben said fiercely. "I swear to you, Julia, you are safe. He will never hurt you again." "Mommy?" Lily's small voice broke through Julia's sobs. The little girl had gotten out of the car, despite Ben's instructions, and was standing a few feet away, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you crying? Did the mean man hurt you?" Julia tried to compose herself, tried to put on a brave face for Lily, but she was too broken, too raw. Ben seemed to understand, gently guiding them both toward the car. "Sometimes people from before, we were a family, try to make us sad," Ben explained to Lily as he helped Julia into the passenger seat. "But we protect each other, right? That's what families do." Lily climbed into the back seat and immediately leaned forward to wrap her arms around Julia's shoulders from behind. "I love you, Mommy," she whispered. "I won't let anyone hurt you." Julia's heart cracked open at the fierce protectiveness in that small voice. This precious child was trying to comfort her, trying to be her shield, just like Ben had been. "I love you too, baby girl," Julia whispered back. So much." As Ben drove them home, Julia stared out the window and tried to process what had happened. For 2 years, she'd lived in terror of Marcus finding her. She'd expected that if he did, she'd be helpless again, that he'd drag her back into that nightmare. But she wasn't helpless. She had Ben now, who had faced down her demons without hesitation. She had Lily, who loved her fiercely and unconditionally. She had a family worth fighting for. "Thank you," she said quietly as they pulled into their driveway. Ben reached over and gently took her uninjured hand. "For what?" "For protecting me, for believing me, for not asking me why I stayed with him for so long." Ben brought her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her palm. "You never have to thank me for loving you," he said simply. The words hung between them, loaded with more meaning than their contract had ever contained. Because that's what this was, Julia realized. Love, messy, complicated, fierce, protective love that had nothing to do with business arrangements and everything to do with two broken people healing each other. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ben tended to Julia's bruised wrist with gentle hands and antiseptic, his jaw tight with controlled fury every time she winced. "I should have been there sooner," he said quietly. "I should have protected you." "You did protect me," Julia said, reaching up to cup his face with her free hand. "You saved me, Ben. In every way that matters, you saved me." When he kissed her, then it was with a desperation that took her breath away. Not just desire, but need. The overwhelming need to claim and be claimed, to heal and be healed. Their first real kiss tasted like tears and promises, and the beginning of something that had nothing to do with contracts and everything to do with forever. Chapter 5. Soul-Deep Connection. The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, Julia's phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand beside her bed. She'd barely slept after the encounter with Marcus 3 days ago, her mind replaying the feel of Ben's protective arms around her, the fierce way he'd defended her, the gentle reverence in his touch as he'd bandaged her bruised wrist. "Julia?" Dr. Martinez's voice was practically vibrating with excitement. "I have the most incredible news about Jamie. Are you sitting down?" Julia bolted upright in bed, her heart hammering against her ribs. In her experience, doctors only called this early with devastating news. Complications, setbacks, the kind of updates that shattered families over morning coffee. "What's wrong?" she whispered, already bracing for the worst. "Nothing's wrong, everything's right." Dr. Martinez's laugh was pure joy. "Julia, the experimental treatment isn't just working. It's working better than our most optimistic projections. Jamie's white cell count hasn't just normalized, it's actually in the lower range of normal. The tumors we were tracking have shrunk by 87%. His bone marrow is producing healthy cells at a rate we typically don't see until month 6 of treatment. The phone slipped from Julia's fingers, clattering to the hardwood floor as she pressed both hands to her mouth, unable to breathe around the sob building in her chest. Jamie was going to live. Her baby brother, who had been dying just months ago, wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. She was still crying when Ben appeared in her doorway, still wearing yesterday's clothes, his hair mussed like he'd been running, his hands through it. He'd clearly been awake all night too, probably standing guard to make sure Marcus didn't try to come back. "Julia, what's wrong?" His voice was sharp with concern as he crossed the room in 3 quick strides. "Nothing's wrong," she gasped, laughing through her tears. "Everything's right, everything's perfect. Jamie, the treatment worked. He's going to be okay, he's going to live." Ben's face transformed, relief and joy flooding his features as he sank onto the bed beside her. "Thank God," he breathed, pulling her into his arms without thinking. "Oh, sweetheart, thank God." Julia melted into his embrace, finally letting herself feel the full weight of the relief, the joy, the overwhelming gratitude. For weeks, she'd been afraid to hope, afraid to believe that Jamie might actually survive. But now, holding on to Ben while happy tears soaked his shirt, she felt like she could finally breathe again. "I can't believe it," she whispered against his chest. "He's really going to be okay." "He's going to be okay," Ben confirmed, his arms tightening around her. "You saved him, Julia. You fought for him, and you saved him." "We saved him," Julia corrected, pulling back to look at Ben's face. "You saved him. You saved both of us." Something shifted in Ben's expression, his green eyes darkening as they searched her face. The air between them suddenly felt charged, electric with the tension that had been building for weeks. "Julia," he said softly, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "I know," she whispered, leaning into his touch. "I feel it too." They were supposed to be maintaining boundaries. They were supposed to be keeping things professional, businesslike, temporary. But looking into Ben's eyes, Julia realized that ship had sailed long ago, probably the first night when she'd held him while he cried, or when he'd protected her from Marcus, or maybe even that very first moment in the hospital cafe, when 2 broken people had recognized each other's pain. "We shouldn't," Ben said, but his thumb was tracing her cheekbone, his gaze dropping to her lips. "Why not?" Julia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ben was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. "Because when this year is over, when the custody case is settled and Jamie is healthy and you're free to go, I don't know if I'll be able to let you." Julia's breath caught at the raw honesty in his voice. "Then don't," she said simply. "Julia, I'm not going anywhere, Ben," she said, her voice stronger now, full of certainty she hadn't felt about anything in years. "I'm not Miranda. I'm not going to wake up one day and decide I don't want this life, this family. I'm not going to abandon you or Lily or what we're building together." "How can you be sure?" Julia took his face in both her hands, making sure he was looking directly into her eyes. "Because I love you," she said simply. "I love you and I love Lily, and I love the life we're creating together. I love the way you make her breakfast every morning, the way you read bedtime stories with different voices, the way you held me when I was broken and made me feel safe for the first time in years." Ben's eyes filled with tears. "Julia, I love how fierce you are when you're protecting the people you care about, how gentle you are when one of us is hurting, how you've made me believe that I deserve good things, that I'm worth loving." Her voice broke slightly. "I've never had a real family before, Ben. Not since my parents died, but with you and Lily, I feel like I'm home." Ben kissed her then, desperate and hungry and full of months of suppressed longing. Julia kissed him, back with equal fervor, pouring all her love and gratitude and hope into the connection between them. "I love you too," Ben whispered against her lips. "God, Julia, I love you so much it terrifies me. I never thought I'd feel this way about anyone again." "Then why are we fighting it?" Julia asked, her hands fisting in his shirt. Ben pulled back to look at her, his eyes dark with desire and something deeper, more profound. Because if we do this, there's no going back. If we cross this line, I'll never be able to let you go. Good, Julia said fiercely, because I never want to go. When Ben kissed her again, it was with a reverence that took her breath away. His hands shook as they traced her face, her shoulders, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough with want and restraint. Instead of answering with words, Julia pulled him down for another kiss, this one deeper, more demanding. She felt him surrender then, felt the exact moment when his control snapped and he stopped, fighting what they both wanted. Their lovemaking was everything Julia had never known it could be, gentle and passionate, desperate and reverent all at once. Ben worshipped her body like it was sacred, his hands and mouth erasing every cruel touch Marcus had ever given her, replacing pain with pleasure, shame with adoration. When he kissed the scars on her wrists where Marcus had grabbed her, Julia cried, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that she was being healed, that someone could love her scars and all. "You're so beautiful," Ben whispered against her skin, "so perfect, so strong, so incredible." Julia had never felt beautiful before, but under Ben's touch, she believed it. She felt cherished, desired, loved in a way that transformed her understanding of what her body could feel, what her heart could hold. When they came together, it was with tears streaming down both their faces, tears of joy, of relief, of the overwhelming emotion of two souls, finally finding their home in each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the morning light streaming through the windows, Julia's head on Ben's chest, his fingers stroking through her hair. "What happens now?" Julia asked quietly. "Now we stop pretending this is temporary," Ben said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Now we start planning a real life together." "What about the contract?" Ben was quiet for a moment. The contract was about saving Lily, about saving Jamie. "But this isn't about saving anyone. This is about choosing to build something beautiful together." Julia lifted her head to look at him, her heart full to bursting. "I choose you," she said simply. "Every day, for the rest of my life, I choose you." "And I choose you," Ben replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You and Lily, and whatever family we create together." The sound of small feet in the hallway made them both freeze. A moment later, Lily's voice called out, "Mommy, Daddy, are you awake?" Julia quickly grabbed Ben's t-shirt from the floor, pulling it over her head, while Ben wrapped the sheet around his waist. They looked at each other and started laughing. Quiet, giddy laughter that felt like champagne bubbles in Julia's chest. "Come in, baby girl," Ben called. Lily bounded into the room and immediately launched herself onto the bed between them, snuggling into Julia's arms with the ease of a child who knew she was loved unconditionally. "Good morning, sunshine," Julia said, pressing a kiss to Lily's messy curls. "Good morning, Mommy. Good morning, Daddy." Lily looked between them with the shrewd observation skills that only 6-year-olds possessed. "You both look happy this morning." "We are happy," Ben said, reaching over to stroke Lily's hair. "We have some good news to share. Uncle Jamie is getting better. The doctors say he's going to be completely healthy." Lily's face lit up. "Really? He's not sick anymore?" "He's not sick anymore," Julia confirmed, her voice thick with grateful tears. Lily threw her arms around Julia's neck, squeezing tight. "I'm so happy, Mommy. I prayed for Uncle Jamie to get better." "Your prayers worked, sweetheart," Julia said, holding her close. As they sat there in bed together, the three of them wrapped in morning light and unconditional love, Julia marveled at how much her life had changed. 6 weeks ago, she'd been broken and desperate, ready to let her brother die because she couldn't save him. Now she had a family, a future, and a love so deep it felt like it could move mountains. "I have an idea," Ben said suddenly. "Why don't we drive to the hospital today and surprise Jamie? And then maybe we can start talking about making this official. Making what official? Julia asked, though her heart was already racing with hope. Ben's smile was soft and full of promise. Our family, our life together, all of it. Julia looked at this man who had saved her in every way possible, at the little girl who had chosen her as a mother, at the future spreading out before them like a golden road. Yes, she said simply, to all of it, yes. And as Ben kissed her while Lily giggled between them, Julia knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of the man she loved, surrounded by the family they were choosing to build together, one day at a time. Chapter 6. Family Becomes Real. 6 weeks after Jamie's miraculous recovery news, Julia found herself in the most surreal place imaginable, sitting in tiny plastic chairs designed for first graders at Roosevelt Elementary's parent-teacher conference. Ben sat beside her, his long legs folded awkwardly under the miniature table, looking like a giant trying to fit into a dollhouse. But it was the look of pure contentment on his face that made Julia's heart skip. The expression of a man who was exactly where he belonged. Mrs. Patterson, Lily's first-grade teacher, was a woman in her 50s with laugh lines around her eyes and the kind of warmth that made children feel instantly safe. She was beaming at them both as she shuffled through a thick folder of Lily's work. I have to tell you, Mr. and Mrs. Abler, the transformation in Lily over the past 3 months has been absolutely remarkable, Mrs. Patterson said, her voice filled with genuine amazement. When the school year started in September, she was one of the most withdrawn children I'd ever taught. She barely spoke above a whisper, flinched when other children got too close, and spent most of recess sitting alone under the big oak tree. Julia's heart clenched at the image of Lily, their confident, bubbly Lily, sitting alone and scared. It was a family portrait in bright crayon colors, 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a house with a red roof and yellow flowers. Above the tallest figure, Lily had written Daddy in crooked letters. Above the smallest figure was me. And above the middle figure, in careful first-grade handwriting, was Mommy. But it was the words at the bottom that made Julia's eyes fill with tears. My forever family, with hearts drawn all around it. She talks about you constantly, Mrs. Abler, Mrs. Patterson continued, seemingly oblivious to the emotional bomb she'd just dropped. How you braid her hair every morning, how you pack her lunch with little notes, how you're teaching her to bake cookies. She's a completely different child, confident, happy, social. Whatever you're doing at home, it's working beautifully. Julia couldn't speak around the lump in her throat. Ben reached over and took her hand, squeezing gently, his own eyes suspiciously bright as he stared at Lily's drawing. She's an incredible kid, Julia finally managed. We're the lucky ones. Mrs. Patterson smiled warmly. It's clear how much you love each other. Lily feels very secure in that love, and it shows in everything she does. As they walked out of the school together, Lily's artwork clutched in Julia's hands. Ben stopped suddenly and pulled her into his arms, right there in the hallway. What was that for? Julia asked, laughing as he spun her around. For being exactly what she needed, Ben said, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. For loving her like she was always yours. She is mine, Julia said fiercely. Contract or no contract, year-long agreement or not, she's my daughter in every way that matters. Ben cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. I want to make this official, Julia. Not the custody arrangement, not the business deal, us, our family. I want to marry you for real, adopt you as Lily's legal mother, make this permanent in every possible way. Julia's heart stopped. Ben, I know we said we'd wait until after the custody hearing, but I can't wait anymore. Every morning I wake up afraid this is all a dream, that you'll realize you deserve better than a broken widower and his complicated life. You're not broken, Julia said firmly, And I could never deserve better than you and Lily. You two are the best things that have ever happened to me." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of running feet and Lily's voice calling, "Mommy, Daddy!" They turned to see Lily racing down the hallway toward them, her backpack bouncing against her back. Behind her, trying to keep up, was Jamie, thin but healthy, his color good, his eyes bright with life instead of the dull exhaustion that had marked his illness. "Uncle Jamie!" Lily launched herself into his arms, and he caught her easily, spinning her around with a laugh that was pure joy. "There's my favorite niece," Jamie said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "How was school today?" "We learned about families," Lily said solemnly. "And I told everyone about how Mommy saved you, and how Daddy saved Mommy, and how we're all saving each other." Jamie's eyes met Julia's over Lily's head, and she saw understanding there, gratitude, and something that looked like relief. At 19, he'd been forced to grow up too fast, to watch his sister sacrifice everything for him. But now he looked like what he was, a teenager who'd been given his life back. "She's right, you know," he said quietly. "You did save me. Both of you." Julia felt tears threaten again. "You would have done the same for me." "Yeah, but I couldn't. I was too sick, too weak. You were strong enough for both of us." Jamie's voice cracked slightly. "I'm never going to forget what you sacrificed for me, Jules. What both of you sacrificed." Ben stepped forward and clapped Jamie gently on the shoulder. "We're family now. That's what family does." The simple statement seemed to break something open in Jamie. His eyes filled with tears as he looked between Ben and Julia, still holding Lily in his arms. "Family," he repeated softly, like he was testing the word. I'd almost forgotten what that felt like. That evening, they made dinner. Together in Ben's, their spacious kitchen, Julia taught Lily how to make her grandmother's famous chocolate chip cookies, while Jamie helped Ben with pasta sauce, the four of them moving around each other with the easy choreography of people who belonged together. "Tell me about Grandma and Grandpa," Lily said as they waited for the cookies to bake, "the ones in the pictures in Mommy's room." Julia's breath caught. She'd unpacked a few precious family photos, placing them on her dresser next to more recent pictures of her new family. She hadn't realized Lily had noticed them. "They were wonderful," Julia said softly, sitting down so she was at Lily's eye level. "Grandma had the most beautiful voice. She used to sing while she cooked, just like I sing to you. And Grandpa was the funniest man in the world. He could make anyone laugh, even when they were sad." "Do you miss them?" Lily asked with the direct honesty that only children possessed. "Every day," Julia admitted. "But you know what? I think they would have loved you so much, sweetheart. Grandma always wanted grandbabies to spoil, and Grandpa would have taught you all his silly jokes." Lily considered this seriously. "Do you think they're watching us from heaven?" Julia glanced at Ben, who nodded encouragingly. "I think they are. And I think they're so happy that we found each other, that we became a family." "Good," Lily said with satisfaction, "because I want them to know that I take really good care of you and Daddy." Julia's heart melted completely. "You do, baby girl. You take such good care of us." Later that night, after Jamie had gone back to his temporary apartment near the hospital for his follow-up appointments, and Lily was asleep with her new family, drawing tape to the wall beside her bed, Julia and Ben sat on their back patio, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the stars. "The custody evaluation is next week," Ben said quietly. Julia tensed slightly. In the happiness of the last few weeks, she'd almost forgotten about the legal battle that had brought them together in the first place. "Are you nervous?" she asked. Ben was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in his glass. "Not anymore. 2 months ago, I was terrified they'd take her away because I couldn't provide a stable home environment. But now," he gestured around them, encompassing the house that had become a home, the life they'd built together. "Now I know they can't take her away from us. We're her family, Julia. Real family, in every way that matters." "What if Miranda?" Challenges the evaluation. What if she tries to prove our marriage was fake? Ben reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing her wedding ring, a simple band they'd chosen together to replace the temporary one from their courthouse ceremony. "Let her try," he said with quiet confidence. "Any evaluator who spends 5 minutes with us will see what's real. They'll see how Lily lights up when she talks about you, how naturally you've stepped into the role of her mother, how happy and secure she is now. They'll see that we're not pretending to be a family, we are one." Julia leaned over and kissed him softly, tasting wine and promises on his lips. "I love you," she whispered against his mouth. "I love you too," Ben replied, pulling her closer. "Both of you, more than I ever thought possible." As they sat together under the stars, Julia thought about the drawing Lily had made. The 3 stick figures holding hands, the carefully drawn hearts, the words, "My forever family." A few months ago, she would never have believed she could have this, a man who loved her unconditionally, a daughter who had chosen her as completely as she'd chosen them, a brother who was healthy and whole, a future that stretched out before them full of possibility. "Ben," she said softly, "yeah, when you ask me to marry you for real, and I know you're going to, the answer is yes." Ben's smile was radiant in the moonlight. "Is that so?" "That's so," Julia confirmed, laughing as he pulled her into his lap and kissed her senseless. "Good," he murmured against her lips, "because I already bought the ring." Julia pulled back to stare at him in shock, and Ben grinned sheepishly. "It's been sitting in my sock drawer for 2 weeks. I've been carrying it around, waiting for the perfect moment." "And when exactly were you planning on finding this perfect moment?" Ben's expression grew serious, tender. "Tomorrow, after Lily's soccer game, when we're all together and happy and exactly where we belong, I was going to ask you both, you to marry me for real, and Lily to let me officially adopt her as my daughter, and you as her mother." Julia's eyes filled with happy tears. "She's going to say yes, you know. She's been asking when she can change her name to match ours." Julia thought about everything that had led her to this moment, the desperation and fear, the impossible contract, the little girl who had called her mommy from the very first day. She thought about broken hearts healing each other, about love that grew from the most unlikely circumstances, about family that chose each other instead of being bound by blood. "Try and stop me," she said, and kissed the man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved, surrounded by the life they were building together, one perfect day at a time. Chapter 7. The Storm Before the Calm. Miranda Whitfield Abler arrived like a perfectly weaponized hurricane on a Tuesday morning at 9:15 a.m., her stiletto heels clicking against the marble floor of Ben's office building with the sharp precision of a countdown to detonation. Julia had been there dropping off Ben's forgotten presentation notes, the quarterly reports he'd left on his nightstand, in his distracted worry over Lily's upcoming school play auditions. Even from across the vast lobby, Miranda was stunning, in the way that only unlimited money and surgical perfection could create. Platinum blonde hair that fell in manufactured waves, a figure that defied both gravity and natural law, and clothes that probably cost more than most people's monthly salaries. She moved through the space like she owned it, like she owned everything, and everyone in it. But it was her eyes that made Julia's blood crystallize in her veins, ice blue and calculating, with the kind of predatory intelligence that came from someone who had turned cruelty into an art form. Julia's phone buzzed with a text from Ben. "Miranda's in the building. Security called up. Please leave through the back entrance and go straight home. I'll handle this," but it was already too late. Miranda had spotted her, and something absolutely feral flashed across her surgically perfected face as she changed direction, her heels now clicking with murderous purpose toward Julia. "Well, well," Miranda said, her voice honey-sweet with poisonous undertones. You must be the new Mrs. Abler. I have to say, Ben certainly has. Interesting taste in his charity cases. Julia felt heat flood her cheeks, but kept her voice steady. You must be Miranda. Ben's mentioned you. Miranda's laugh was like glass breaking. I'm sure he has, though I doubt he's told you the whole truth. About our marriage, about why it really ended. She tilted her head, studying Julia with the detached interest of a scientist examining a bug. Did he tell you how inadequate I found him? How boring, how predictable, how absolutely suffocating domestic life became? Julia's hands clenched at her sides, but she refused to take the bait. What do you want, Miranda? What I want is what's rightfully mine, Miranda said, her mask slipping slightly to reveal the venom underneath. My daughter, for starters. The money that should have been mine in the divorce. And what about you? Will you say yes to being Lily's legal mother? Julia thought about everything that had led her to this moment. The desperation and fear, the impossible contract, the little girl who had called her mommy from the very first day. She thought about broken hearts healing each other, about love that grew from the most unlikely circumstances, about family that chose each other instead of being bound by blood. Try and stop me, she said, and kissed the man who had saved her. In every way a person could be saved, surrounded by the life they were building together, one perfect day at a time. Chapter 7. The Storm Before the Calm. Miranda Whitfield Abler arrived like a perfectly weaponized hurricane on a Tuesday morning at 9:15 a.m., her stiletto heels clicking against the marble floor of Ben's office building with the sharp precision of a countdown to detonation. Julia had been there dropping off Ben's forgotten presentation notes, the quarterly reports he'd left on his nightstand in his distracted worry over Lily's upcoming school play auditions. Even from across the vast lobby, Miranda was stunning in the way that only unlimited money and surgical perfection could create. Platinum blonde hair that fell in manufactured waves, a figure that defied both gravity and natural law, and clothes that probably cost more than most people's monthly salaries. She moved through the space like she owned it, like she owned everything and everyone in it. But it was her eyes that made Julia's blood crystallize in her veins, ice blue and calculating, with the kind of predatory intelligence that came from someone who had turned cruelty into an art form. Julia's phone buzzed with a text from Ben. Miranda's in the building. Security called up. Please leave through the back entrance and go straight. Home, I'll handle this, but it was already too late. Miranda had spotted her, and something absolutely feral flashed across her surgically perfected face as she changed direction, her heels now clicking with murderous purpose toward Julia. Well, well, Miranda said, her voice honey-sweet with poisonous undertones. You must be the new Mrs. Abler. I have to say, Ben certainly has. Interesting taste in his charity cases. Julia felt heat flood her cheeks, but kept her voice steady. You must be Miranda. Ben's mentioned you. Miranda's laugh was like glass breaking. I'm sure he has, though I doubt he's told you the whole truth. About our marriage, about why it really ended. She tilted her head, studying Julia with the detached interest of a scientist examining a bug. Did he tell you how inadequate I found him? How boring, how predictable, how absolutely suffocating domestic life became? Julia's hands clenched at her sides, but she refused to take the bait. What do you want, Miranda? What I want is what's rightfully mine, Miranda said, her mask slipping slightly to reveal the venom underneath. My daughter, for starters. The money that should have been mine in the divorce. And maybe just a little bit of satisfaction watching Ben's pathetic attempt at replacement crumble. Lily isn't yours, Julia said quietly, but there was steel in her voice. You gave up any claim to her when you walked away. Miranda's eyes narrowed dangerously. Oh, sweetie, you have no idea what you're talking about. Lily is my biological daughter, my flesh and blood. And you You're nothing but a convenient stand-in, playing house with my family while it suits you." "This isn't a game to me," Julia said, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "I love Lily. I love Ben. We're a family." "A family?" Miranda threw back her head and laughed, the sound echoing off the marble walls. "You think this is real? You think Ben actually loves you?" She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. "He married you because he needed a warm body to play mommy for the custody hearing. He chose you specifically because you were desperate enough to agree to anything and broken enough that you wouldn't expect real love." Each word hit Julia like a physical blow, awakening every insecurity she'd ever had about her relationship with Ben. The voice in her head, Marcus's voice, her own voice, whispered that Miranda was right, that she'd been fooling herself, that men like Ben didn't really fall in love with women like her. "That's not true," Julia said, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. "Isn't it?" Miranda pulled out her phone and scrolled to something, then turned the screen toward Julia. "This is the original contract Ben had his lawyers draw up. Very detailed, very specific about what he expected from his fake wife." Julia's vision blurred as she read words that felt like knives. Marriage of convenience, temporary arrangement, compensation for services rendered, no expectation of genuine emotional attachment. "He kept a copy, you know," Miranda continued, conversationally, "in his desk drawer at home. Has he ever told you he loves you without mentioning how grateful he is? Has he ever talked about your future together without referencing Lily's needs or the custody case?" Julia's heart was breaking, but she couldn't seem to form words to defend herself, to argue, to point out all the ways Miranda was wrong. Because wasn't there a grain of truth in what she was saying? Hadn't their relationship started as a business arrangement? Hadn't Ben initially chosen her because she was convenient, desperate, willing to do anything for the money to save Jamie? "I can see the doubt in your eyes," Miranda said with satisfaction. "Good, at least you're not completely stupid." She stepped even closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to disappear from their lives, quietly, without drama. In return, I won't destroy Ben in court or drag your sordid past through the media. Because yes, I know all about Marcus, about your history of choosing abusive men, about how you were probably attracted to Ben because he reminded you of what you thought you deserved." Julia felt like she was drowning, like the floor was giving way beneath her feet. Every cruel word Marcus had ever said to her came flooding back. Every moment of self-doubt, every reason she'd believed she wasn't worthy of love. "Ben and Lily will be better off without you," Miranda continued remorselessly. "You know it, I know it, and deep down, Ben knows it too. He's just too polite to say so. But I'm not." She smiled then, beautiful and terrible. "Walk away now while you can still keep some dignity, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of woman Ben Abler married, and why he'll inevitably want to get rid of you." With that, Miranda turned and walked away, leaving Julia standing in the lobby with tears streaming down her face and her entire world crumbling around her. Julia drove home in a daze, Miranda's words echoing in her head, like a toxic mantra. By the time she pulled into their driveway, she was shaking so hard she could barely hold the steering wheel. The house felt different when she walked in, not like the warm, loving home it had been that morning, but like a museum of someone else's life, someone else's happiness. She walked through the rooms mechanically, seeing evidence of their life together, but suddenly doubting all of it. The family photos on the mantle, were they just props for the custody case? The drawings Lily had made for her, was she just a placeholder until Ben found someone better? Their bed, where they'd made love and whispered promises. Had Ben been thinking about the contract the whole time? She found herself in Ben's study, staring at his desk. Her hands were trembling as she opened the drawers, hating herself for looking but unable to stop. And there, in the bottom drawer, beneath some old tax documents, was a folder labeled Davis. Contract. Julia's heart stopped as she opened it and saw the original agreement, pages of legal language that reduced their marriage, their love, their family to a business transaction. Her signature looked foreign to her now, desperate and naive, but it was the handwritten notes in the margins that destroyed her completely. Ben's handwriting, dated just weeks ago, extend arrangement if necessary for custody. Consider long-term benefits of maintaining family structure. Julia's attachment to Lily could be advantageous. Attachment, advantageous. Like she was a useful tool rather than a woman he loved. Julia sank into Ben's chair, the contract trembling in her hands as the full weight of her situation crashed over her. Miranda was right. She had been living in a fantasy, believing that a desperate business arrangement had somehow become real love. But Ben was still thinking strategically, still viewing their relationship through the lens of what was best for Lily, best for the custody case, best for his life. She wasn't his wife. She wasn't Lily's mother. She was an employee whose job was to play those roles convincingly. The sound of the front door opening sent panic shooting through her. Ben's voice called out, "Julia, I'm home early. I thought we could." He appeared in the doorway of his study and stopped dead, taking in her tear-stained face, the contract in her hands, the devastation in her eyes. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly. But Julia could see the guilt flash across his face, the knowledge that she'd discovered something he'd hoped to keep hidden. "Reading about my job performance," Julia said, her voice eerily calm despite the storm raging inside her. "Wondering if I've been meeting expectations as your temporary wife." "Julia, let me explain." "Explain what?" She stood up, holding the contract between them like a shield. "Explain how you still think of me as a business arrangement. Explain these notes about my attachment to Lily being advantageous. Explain how everything I thought was real has just been an elaborate performance." Ben stepped toward her, his hands outstretched. "That's not what this is." "Don't!" Julia's voice cracked. "Please don't lie to me anymore. I can't handle any more lies." "I've never lied to you," Ben said desperately. "Julia, I love you. What we have is real, is it?" Julia laughed bitterly. "Because your ex-wife painted a very different picture. She told me exactly why you chose me. Desperate, broken, grateful for scraps of affection. The perfect temporary mother who wouldn't expect too much." Ben's face went white. "You talked to Miranda. Julia, whatever she said was true," Julia finished. "At least partially. You did choose me because I was convenient. You did marry me for Lily's sake. You did pay me to play a role in your life. That's how it started," Ben admitted, his voice breaking. "But that's not how it is now. Julia, you have to believe me." "I can't," Julia whispered, and the words came out like a sob. "I can't believe you anymore, Ben, because every time I look at you, I'm going to wonder if you're with me because you love me or because I'm useful to you." The sound of the school bus pulling up outside made them both freeze. Lily would be home any minute, bouncing through the door with stories about her day, expecting hugs and snacks and the warm family routine they'd built together. "Julia, please," Ben begged. "Don't do this. Don't let Miranda destroy what we have." But Julia was already moving, walking past him toward the stairs. "I need to pack," she said quietly. "I need to leave before she gets inside." "You can't leave," Ben said, following her. "Lily needs you. I need you." Julia stopped on the stairs, not turning around. "You need a mother for Lily. You need a wife for the custody case. You don't need me specifically, Ben. Anyone could fill this role. That's not true, isn't it?" Julia finally turned to look at him, and Ben felt his heart shatter at the devastation in her eyes. "If I hadn't spilled coffee on you that day, if some other desperate woman had been in that cafe, would you have chosen her instead?" Ben's silence was answer enough. Julia nodded, her face crumpling with grief. That's what I thought. As she continued up the stairs to pack her things, Ben stood frozen in the hallway, listening to the sound of Lily's key in the front door, knowing that in moments he'd have to explain to his daughter why the woman she called Mommy was leaving them. And for the first time since this all began, Ben wondered if Miranda had been right about one thing. Maybe Julia really would be better off without them. Maybe love wasn't enough to overcome the ugly foundation their relationship had been built on. Maybe some fairy tales were just too broken to fix. Chapter 8. When Everything Falls Apart. Lily found her father sitting on the kitchen floor at 3:17 a.m. on what had become the worst night of their lives. His back pressed against the stainless steel refrigerator, holding one of Julia's favorite coffee mugs in his hands like it was made of spun glass and broken dreams. It had been 7 days since Julia left, 7 days that felt like 7 years, and Ben looked like a man who'd forgotten not just how to live, but why living had ever seemed important. The mug was from a set Julia had bought at a little pottery shop downtown. Cheerful yellow sunflowers painted by hand, the kind of simple, beautiful thing that had made their house feel like a home. Now it seemed to mock him with its brightness, its promise of morning sunshine and shared coffee that would never come again. "Daddy?" Lily's small voice cut through the suffocating silence like a blade through silk. She stood in the doorway wearing the unicorn pajamas Julia had bought her for her birthday, clutching the teddy bear Julia had named Mr. Snuggles during one of their bedtime story sessions. At 7 years old, Lily looked like a ghost of herself, hollow-eyed, thin, fading away, without the maternal love that had brought her back to life. "Why are you sitting on the floor again?" she asked, her voice carrying a weariness that no child should ever possess. "I was just thinking, sweetheart," Ben said, his voice hoarse from disuse. "Couldn't sleep." Lily padded across the cold kitchen, a floor, and settled herself in Ben's lap, her small body fitting perfectly against his chest. She felt so fragile, so breakable, like she might disappear if he didn't hold her tight enough. "I can't sleep either," Lily whispered. "I keep having dreams that Mommy comes back and then I wake up and she's still gone." Ben's arms tightened around his daughter, his heart breaking all over again. In 5 days, Lily had regressed to the scared, withdrawn child she'd been before Julia came into their lives. She'd stopped talking to her friends at school, stopped drawing her happy family pictures, stopped being the bright, confident little girl Julia had helped her become. "I know, baby," Ben whispered into her hair. "I know. Why did she leave us?" "Daddy, did we do something wrong?" The question hit Ben like a physical blow. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that the woman she considered her mother had left because she'd been made to believe their love wasn't real? How do you tell your daughter that your own failures, your own inability to fight for what mattered most, had cost them both the person they loved more than life itself? "We didn't do anything wrong, Lily," Ben said carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that don't make sense even to themselves." "But she said she loved us," Lily said, her voice muffled against Ben's chest. "She promised she'd never leave like the mean lady did. She promised she was my real mommy forever." Ben closed his eyes, remembering Julia's fierce declaration that night when she'd held Lily after a nightmare. "I'll never leave you, baby girl. That's a mommy promise." The memory felt like a knife twisting in his chest. "She did love us, sweetheart. She still does." "Then why won't she come home?" Lily's voice cracked, and Ben felt hot tears soaking through his shirt. "I need her, Daddy. I need my mommy." Ben had been asking himself the same question for 5 days. He'd called Julia dozens of times, left voicemails that ranged from desperate pleas to angry demands to broken whispers of how much he loved her. He'd driven to her friend's apartment where she was staying, but she wouldn't see him. He'd sent flowers, letters, even had Jamie try to talk to her, but Julia had disappeared as completely as if she'd never existed. The custody evaluation was in 2 days. Ben's lawyer had been calling frantically, trying to understand why Ben's wife had suddenly vanished right before the most important hearing of his life. Miranda's lawyer had already filed motions claiming that Ben's marriage was fraudulent, that his home was unstable, that Lily would be better off in a real family environment. Ben should have been panicking about losing custody. Instead, all he could think about was the look in Julia's eyes when she'd found that contract. The way her voice had broken when she'd asked if he would have chosen another desperate woman. Just as easily, the truth was, he probably would have. 6 months ago, desperate and terrified of losing Lily, he might have married anyone who could play the role he needed. But that was before he'd seen Julia break down crying over spilled coffee, before he'd watched her love his daughter with a fierceness that took his breath away, before he'd fallen so completely in love with her that he couldn't imagine existing without her. "Daddy," Lily said suddenly, pulling back to look at him with eyes that were far too serious for a 6-year-old. "Are you going to fight for Mommy?" "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "In movies, when the daddy loves the mommy but she goes away, he fights for her. He tells her he loves her and he makes her come home." Lily's small hands came up to frame Ben's face. "You love Mommy, right?" "More than anything," Ben whispered. "Then why aren't you fighting for her?" Ben stared at his daughter, seeing Julia's fierce determination reflected in Lily's expression, hearing Julia's voice in Lily's questions. His 6-year-old was braver than he was, more willing to fight for their family than the man who was supposed to protect them all. "You're right," Ben said suddenly, his voice stronger than it had been in days. "You're absolutely right, baby girl. I should be fighting for her." Lily's face lit up with hope for the first time since Julia left. "Really? You're going to bring Mommy home?" Ben stood up, still holding Lily in his arms, feeling purpose flood through him for the first time in 5 days. "I'm going to try, sweetheart. I'm going to do everything I can to bring our family back together." An hour later, Ben was standing outside the small apartment building where Julia was staying with her friend Sarah, a woman she'd known from her old job. It was 4 a.m., but Ben couldn't wait another minute. He'd left Lily with Mrs. Chen next door, the elderly woman who sometimes babysat, and driven across town in his pajamas like a man possessed. He pressed the buzzer for Sarah's apartment and waited, his heart pounding against his ribs. "Go away, Ben." Julia's voice came through the intercom, thick with tears and exhaustion. "I'm not leaving," Ben said, leaning close to the speaker. "I'll stand here all day if I have to. I'll stand here until you agree to talk to me." "There's nothing to talk about." "There's everything to talk about," Ben said desperately. "Julia, please, 5 minutes. Just give me 5 minutes to explain." Silence stretched between them, and Ben was about to press the buzzer again when the front door clicked open. He took the stairs 3 at a time, finding Sarah's apartment door already ajar. Julia was standing by the window, her back to him, wearing an old t-shirt and sweatpants that hung loose on her too thin frame. She looked like she'd been crying for days, like she hadn't slept or eaten since she'd left. The sight of her looking so broken nearly brought Ben to his knees. "You look terrible," he said softly. Julia let out a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been so hollow. "So do you." Ben moved closer, close enough to see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands were wrapped around herself, like she was trying to hold herself together. "Lily's not eating," he said quietly. "She's not sleeping, not talking to her friends. She keeps asking when you're coming home, and I don't know what to tell her, because I don't understand why you left." Julia's shoulders shook, but she didn't. "Turn around." "You know why I left." "No, I don't," Ben said, his voice rising with frustration. "I know Miranda got to you. I know she said things that hurt you, but I don't understand how you could think any of it was true. How you could believe that what we have isn't real, because it started as a lie," Julia said, finally turning to face him. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her face pale and drawn. Because you chose me out of desperation, not love. Because I've been living in a fantasy, believing that someone like you could actually fall in love with someone like me. Someone like you? Ben stared at her in disbelief. Julia, do you have any idea what you are to me? To Lily? I'm the hired help, Julia said bitterly. The convenient temporary mother who got too attached and started believing her own performance. Ben crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbing her shoulders gently but firmly. Look at me, he said fiercely. Look at me and tell me what you see. Julia tried to turn away, but Ben's hands on her face stopped her, forcing her to meet his eyes. I see a man who married me for money, she whispered. You see a man who is dying without you, Ben corrected, his voice breaking. You see a man who hasn't slept in 5 days because every time he closes his eyes, he sees the woman he loves walking away from him. You see a father who doesn't know how to explain to his daughter why the only mother she's ever really known abandoned her. I didn't abandon her. Then come home, Ben said desperately. Come home and prove it. Come home and let me show you how real this is, how much I love you, how much we both need you. Julia's face crumpled, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. I can't, Ben. I can't live wondering if you're with me because you love me or because I'm useful to you. I can't look at Lily knowing that maybe I'm just the placeholder until her real mother comes back. Miranda is never coming back, Ben said fiercely. She doesn't want Lily. She wants to hurt me, and you... His thumbs traced her cheekbones, wiping away her tears. You are Lily's real mother. You're the one who braids her hair and packs her lunch and sings her to sleep. You're the one who held her when she was scared and loved her when she felt abandoned. Biology doesn't make you a mother, Julia. Love does, and you love her more than Miranda ever could. But the contract? Fuck the contract, Ben said, the profanity shocking in its intensity. I'm going to burn that goddamn piece of paper the minute I get home. Julia, yes, I married you because I was desperate. Yes, I chose you because you needed money and I needed a wife. But that was 6 months ago. That was before I knew you, before I loved you, before you became the center of my entire world. He pressed his forehead against hers, his voice dropping to a whisper. I would choose you now, Julia. If I met you today, knowing nothing about contracts or custody cases or desperate arrangements, I would still choose you. I would choose you every day for the rest of my life. Julia closed her eyes, wanting so desperately to believe him, but afraid to hope. The custody hearing is tomorrow, Ben continued. I'll probably lose. Without you there, without being able to prove that Lily has a stable, loving home, Miranda will probably get custody. But I don't care about any of that anymore. I just want you to come home. I just want my family back together. Julia opened her eyes and saw the truth written across Ben's face, raw, desperate love that had nothing to do with contracts or convenience. She saw a man who was willing to lose everything just to have her back, who cared more about their love than about winning his case. Ben, she whispered. Come home, Julia, he said, his voice breaking. Please, come home to us. For the first time in 5 days, Julia allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, some fairy tales could survive being broken. Maybe some love was strong enough to overcome any foundation it was built on. Maybe it was time to stop running and start fighting for the family she'd always dreamed of having. Chapter 9, The Grand Declaration of Forever. Julia's hands trembled as she stood outside the imposing limestone facade of the county courthouse at 7:45 a.m., wearing the sapphire blue dress Ben had bought her for their first official family portrait. The one that now seemed like a lifetime ago, when they'd still been pretending their love was temporary. She'd come home with him 2 nights ago, but there hadn't been time for lengthy reunions or passionate reconciliations. The custody hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp, and Ben's attorney, Margaret Chen, had made it crystal clear that their chances were grim without being able to prove the stability and authenticity of their marriage. The morning air was crisp, with the promise of autumn, but Julia felt like she was burning from the inside out with a combination of terror and fierce determination. Everything they'd built together, their family, their love, their future, would be decided in the next few hours by a judge who had never seen Lily's gap-toothed smile or heard her giggle during their Saturday morning pancake battles. "You don't have to do this," Ben said quietly, his voice rough from another sleepless night. He was adjusting his charcoal grey tie with nervous fingers, the same tie Lily had picked out for him because she said it made his eyes look like daddy-colored. "Sky, if this goes badly, if Miranda wins custody—" "She's not going to win," Julia said with a certainty that surprised them both. "She's not going to take Lily away from us." Ben looked at her with something that might have been awe. "How can you be so sure?" Julia took his hands in hers, feeling the familiar calluses from weekend projects with Lily, the wedding ring that matched her own, the strength that had held their family together even when she'd been too scared to believe in it. "Because what we have is real, Ben. Whatever it started as, whatever contracts we signed or arrangements we made, what we are now is a family, and families fight for each other." Before Ben could respond, the courthouse doors opened and Miranda emerged, flanked by her high-powered legal team. She looked every inch the successful socialite in her designer suit and perfect makeup, but Julia could see the cold calculation in her eyes as she spotted them. "Benjamin," Miranda said pleasantly, as if she were greeting an old friend instead, "of the man whose life she was trying to destroy. And Julia, how quaint that you decided to show up." "I'm exactly where I belong," Julia said quietly, but her voice carried steel that made Miranda's eyebrows rise slightly. "We'll see about that," Miranda replied with a cold smile. "The judge is very interested in hearing about your fascinating marriage arrangement. Amazing what money can buy these days, isn't it?" Julia felt Ben tense beside her, but she kept her voice calm. "What money can't buy, Miranda, is love. It can't buy the way Lily lights up when she tells me about her day, or the way she curls up in my lap when she's scared, or the way she calls me mommy like it's the most natural thing in the world." Miranda's smile faltered slightly. "We'll see how natural it feels when she's living with her real mother." "I am her real mother," Julia said simply, and the words rang with such conviction that even Miranda's lawyers looked uncomfortable. The hearing was everything Julia had expected it to be: brutal, invasive, and designed to tear apart everything they'd built together. Miranda's lawyers painted their marriage as a fraud, their home as unstable, their love as a performance designed to fool the courts. They presented the original contract as evidence, dissected every aspect of their financial arrangement, questioned the speed with which they'd married and the convenience of their timing. Julia felt each accusation like a physical blow, but she held her head high and answered every question with honesty. Yes, she had married Ben for money initially. Yes, their arrangement had been contractual. Yes, she had been desperate when she agreed to his proposal. But when the judge asked her why she was still there, why she was fighting for custody of a child she'd known for only 6 months, Julia's voice never wavered. "Because she's my daughter," Julia said simply. "Not because of biology or legal documents or financial arrangements, but because she chose me and I chose her. Because I love her more than my own life, and I would do anything to protect her happiness, even if it means staying in a loveless marriage." Miranda's lawyer pressed. Julia looked across the courtroom at Ben, who was watching her with his heart in his eyes, and smiled. "There's nothing loveless about our marriage," she said. "I love my husband more than I ever thought it was possible. To love another person. Our relationship may have started as a business arrangement, but it became something beautiful and real and permanent. We're not just playing house. We are a family. When it was Ben's turn to testify, he was magnificent. He spoke about Julia's transformation from a desperate woman to a confident mother, about Lily's happiness and security, about the home they'd built together that was full of laughter and love and everything a child needed to thrive. But it was when Miranda took the stand that everything changed. "Mrs. Whitfield," Ben's lawyer said during cross-examination, "you've claimed that you want custody of Lily because you believe she'd be better off with her biological mother. But isn't it true that you voluntarily relinquished custody when you left your marriage?" "I was going through a difficult time," Miranda said smoothly. "I needed space to find myself, to understand what I really wanted. And what you really wanted was to abandon your husband and child without a word." Miranda's composure cracked slightly. "I didn't abandon anyone. I simply..." "You left a note," Ben's lawyer continued, producing a document. "A note in which you stated, and I quote, 'I never wanted to be a mother. I'm not cut out for this domestic life. Don't try to find me.'" Julia watched Miranda's face go white as the lawyer continued reading from her own words. Cruel, selfish declarations about how motherhood had trapped her, how she'd never felt any maternal instincts toward Lily, how she'd only married Ben for his money and social status. "If you never wanted to be a mother," the lawyer concluded, "why are you here now seeking custody?" Miranda's mask slipped completely then, revealing the vindictive woman underneath. "Because I don't want some nobody playing house with my family," she snarled. "Because Ben thinks he can replace me with his charity case, and I won't stand for it." The courtroom went dead silent. Even Miranda's own lawyers looked horrified as she continued her tirade. "Lily is mine, whether I want her or not. She's my blood, my property, and I'll be damned if I let some desperate woman take my place just because she's willing to play mommy for money." The judge's gavel came down hard. "Mrs. Whitfield, you will control yourself in my courtroom." But the damage was done. Miranda had revealed her true motivations. Not love for her daughter, but spite toward her ex-husband and the woman who had replaced her. After a brief recess, the judge returned with his decision. "In my 30 years on the bench," he said, his voice grave, "I've rarely seen a case that more clearly illustrates the difference between biological parentage and true parenthood." Julia held her breath. Ben's hand clasped tightly in hers. "Mrs. Whitfield has made it abundantly clear that her interest in this child stems not from maternal love, but from a desire to inflict pain on her former husband. She abandoned her daughter without regard for the child's emotional well-being, and her testimony today demonstrates a fundamental lack of fitness for parenthood." Miranda's face went ashen as the judge continued. "Mr. and Mrs. Abler, while your marriage may have begun as a practical arrangement, it is clear to this court that it has evolved into something genuine and lasting. Mrs. Abler's testimony regarding her love for this child was compelling and heartfelt. More importantly, the child herself has flourished under their care." The judge looked directly at Julia then. "Mrs. Abler, you may not have given birth to Lily, but in every way that matters you are her mother, and it is clear that she is your daughter." Julia felt tears streaming down her face as the judge pronounced his final ruling. "Custody of Lily Marie Abler is hereby awarded permanently to Benjamin and Julia Abler. Mrs. Whitfield's petition is denied, and given her testimony, today I'm also terminating her parental rights entirely." The gavel came down with finality, and Julia collapsed into Ben's arms, both of them crying with relief and joy and overwhelming gratitude. They had won. Their family was safe. As they left the courthouse, Miranda made one last attempt to wound them. "This isn't over," she hissed as they passed. "I'll appeal. I'll fight this until..." "No," Ben said quietly, his arm tight around Julia's waist. "You won't. Because if you try to hurt my family again, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of mother you really are. I'll make sure your own testimony today follows you everywhere you go." Miranda stared at them for a moment, perhaps finally, realizing that she had lost more than just a custody case. She had revealed herself to be exactly the kind of person who shouldn't be around children. Without another word, she turned and walked away, clicking heels growing fainter until she disappeared entirely from their lives. That evening, they picked up Lily from Mrs. Chen's house, and Julia knelt down to her daughter's eye level in their front yard. "Lily, sweetheart, I have something important to tell you." Lily looked between them with wide eyes. "Are you leaving again, Mommy?" "Never," Julia said fiercely, pulling Lily into her arms. "I'm never leaving you again, baby girl. In fact, the judge said that I get to be your mommy forever and ever. Legally, officially, permanently." Lily's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really, really and truly. Really and truly," Ben confirmed, joining them on the ground and wrapping both his girls in his arms. "We're a family, Lily, a real legal forever family." "I knew it," Lily said, with the absolute confidence that only children possessed. "I knew you wouldn't let the mean lady take me away." As they sat together on their front lawn, holding each other in the golden light of late afternoon, Julia marveled at how much their lives had changed. 6 months ago, she'd been broken and desperate, ready to sign away her brother's life because she couldn't save him. Now she had a family, a future, and a love so deep it felt like it could move mountains. "So, what happens now?" Julia asked, looking between her husband and daughter. Ben smiled, the first truly relaxed smile she'd seen from him in weeks. "Now we go inside and celebrate. Now we start planning the rest of our lives together." "Can we have pancakes for dinner?" Lily asked hopefully. "Heart-shaped pancakes," Julia agreed, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "With extra syrup," Ben added, making Lily giggle. As they walked toward their house, their home together, Julia realized that sometimes the most beautiful fairy tales were the ones that started with the most impossible circumstances. Sometimes, love really could overcome anything, could transform business arrangements into soul-deep connections, could turn strangers into family. Sometimes, if you were very lucky, you got to live happily ever after. Chapter 10. Love's Perfect Promise. 14 months later, Julia stood in front of the antique mirror in their master bedroom, her hands resting protectively on the gentle swell of her belly, where they're twins, a boy and a girl, according to last week's ultrasound, were growing strong and healthy at 7 months along. The morning light streaming through their east-facing windows caught the diamond in her new engagement ring, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the walls like promises of all the joy yet to come. At 29, Julia had never felt more beautiful, more complete, more worthy of the love that surrounded her like warm honey. The scared, desperate woman who had spilled coffee on a stranger in a hospital cafe felt like someone from another lifetime, someone she could barely remember being. "You're absolutely radiant," Ben said softly from the doorway, his voice thick, with the same wonder that had colored his words every morning for the past year. He was already dressed in his navy suit, the one Lily had declared made him look like a movie daddy, but his tie hung loose around his neck, waiting for Lily's expert assistance. Julia turned to smile at him, her heart still doing that little skip and flutter dance it had been doing since the day he'd first told her he loved her. "I feel radiant," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "I feel like I'm exactly where I belong." "The photographer is here," Ben said, crossing the room to wrap his arms around her from behind, his hands covering hers on her belly. "Jamie and Lily are already arguing about who gets to hold the newest family pictures." Julia laughed, leaning back against his chest. Jamie had moved in with them permanently 6 months ago when he'd started college nearby, fully recovered and stronger than ever. At 20, he was the kind of young man who made Julia proud every day, kind, funny, devoted to his family, and completely enamored with being an uncle to Lily, and soon to be uncle to the twins. "Are you ready for this?" Ben asked, pressing a kiss to her neck. "More than ready," Julia replied, turning in his arms to face him. "Are you?" Instead of answering with words, Ben pulled out a small velvet box from his pocket. Julia's breath caught, even though they were already married, already wearing wedding rings, already building a life together. "Ben, I know we're already married," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know we already have rings and vows and legal documents, but those were born out of desperation, out of need, out of circumstances neither of us would have chosen." He opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring, not enormous or ostentatious, but perfect, classic, exactly what Julia would have chosen if she'd been able to dream of such things. "This is different," Ben continued, dropping to one knee, right there in their bedroom. "This is me choosing you, not because I need you, but because I love you. This is me asking you to marry me, not for Lily's sake or for any legal reason, but because I want to spend every day for the rest of my life loving you." Julia's eyes filled with tears as she looked down at this incredible man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. "Julia Davis Abler," Ben said, his voice steady despite the emotion choking him, "will you marry me again? Will you be my wife not because of contracts or arrangements or desperate circumstances, but because we choose each other every single day?" "Yes," Julia whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course, yes." Ben slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, like everything else in their life together, like it had always been meant to be there. Their kiss was interrupted by Lily bursting through the door, Jamie close behind her. "Did you ask her? Did she say yes? Are we having another wedding?" Lily bounced excitedly, her 8-year-old energy filling the room. "We're having another wedding," Ben confirmed, lifting Lily into his arms. "A real one this time, with all our family and friends, with vows we write ourselves, with everything we want it to be." "Can I be the maid of honor?" Lily asked Julia seriously. "I know I'm little, but I've been practicing walking in Mommy's high heels, and I promise I won't drop the rings." "You can be whatever you want to be, baby girl," Julia said, her heart overflowing as she looked at their little family. "This is our wedding, and that means we get to make all the rules." Jamie cleared his throat from the doorway. "Speaking of rules, I have something to say too." He stepped forward, suddenly looking nervous despite his usual confidence. "Ben, I know you married my sister to help her save my life. I know this whole thing started because you needed her and she needed you. But I want you to know." His voice cracked slightly. "I want you to know that you're the best thing that ever happened to her, to both of us." Ben's eyes filled with tears as Jamie continued. "You gave me my life back, but more than that, you gave Julia the family she's always deserved. You loved her the way she should be loved, protected her when she needed protecting, and made her believe she was worthy of happiness." Jamie looked directly at Ben then, his young face serious with the weight of what he was saying. "I know I'm just her little brother, but I want to officially welcome you to our family, not as the man who saved us, but as the man who loves us. As my brother." The two men embraced then, and Julia had to grip the doorframe to keep from collapsing with the overwhelming joy of watching her brother and her husband, the two most important men in her life, claim each other as family. 2 weeks later, their backyard was transformed into a fairy tale setting for their real wedding. White roses and twinkling lights created an enchanted garden. Soft music played while their closest friends and family took their seats, and Julia stood at the window watching it all come together. She wore a simple but elegant white dress that accommodated her growing belly, her hair in soft waves, with the diamond earrings Ben had given her for their first anniversary, and the engagement ring that caught the light with every movement. "You ready, sis?" Jamie asked, offering her his arm. At 20, he was tall and strong and healthy, everything she'd prayed he would be during those dark days in the hospital. "I've been ready my entire life," Julia said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. As they walked down the aisle together, Julia's eyes found Ben immediately. He stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, but it was the expression on his face that took her breath away. Pure love, pure joy, pure wonder at the life they'd built together. Lily stood beside him, as their maid of honor, radiant in a pale pink dress and a flower crown, holding a bouquet of white roses with hands that barely shook. She'd practiced walking in Julia's heels for weeks, and the effort had paid off. She looked like a princess. The ceremony was everything their first wedding hadn't been, full of love, surrounded by people who cared about them, celebrating a union that was born of choice rather than desperation. Ben's vows brought tears to everyone's eyes. "Julia, you came into my life when I was drowning, and you didn't just throw me a lifeline. You taught me how to swim. You loved my daughter like she was your own before you had any reason to. You fought for our family when I was too scared to believe we deserved it. And you've shown me every day what it means to be loved unconditionally. I promise to love you with that same fierce devotion for the rest of my life." Julia's vows were just as heartfelt. "Ben, you saw me at my lowest moment and didn't just offer me help. You offered me hope. You trusted me with your most precious gift, your daughter, and you've made me believe that I'm worthy of the love I've always dreamed of. You've given me a family, a home, a future I never dared to imagine. I promise to love you and Lily, and the babies we're expecting with everything I have, every day, for the rest of our lives." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife for the second time, but truly for the first time, Ben's kiss was different from their first wedding, deeper, more certain, full of the promise of all the years ahead of them. The reception in their backyard was perfect, full of laughter and dancing and speeches that made everyone cry happy tears. Lily gave a toast that had the entire crowd in stitches. "I prayed for a mommy every night, and God sent me the best one in the whole world. Now I'm praying for twin brothers, but Mommy says I might get sisters instead, which is okay too because I'll teach them how to be awesome like me." As the evening wound down and their guests began to leave, Julia found herself swaying in Ben's arms on the makeshift dance floor they'd created on their back patio. Lily asleep in a chair nearby with Jamie's jacket draped over her shoulders. "Any regrets?" Ben asked quietly, his hands resting on her lower back. "Only one," Julia said, smiling up at him. Ben's eyebrows rose in concern. "What's that?" "I wish I could go back and tell that scared, desperate woman in the hospital cafe that everything was going to be okay, that the coffee she spilled was going to change her entire life, that the man she crashed into was going to become her whole world." Ben's smile was soft and full of wonder. "You think she would have believed you?" "Probably not," Julia admitted. "Some fairy tales are too good to be true until they're your reality." As they danced under the stars, surrounded by the remnants of their perfect day, Julia felt a flutter of movement in her belly, their twins reminding her that their family was still growing, still becoming everything they dreamed it could be. "I love you, Mrs. Abler," Ben whispered against her ear. "I love you too, Mr. Abler, forever and always." And as they held each other in the garden where they'd pledged their real love, Julia knew with absolute certainty that forever was exactly what they'd have. A lifetime of love, laughter, family dinners around their big table, bedtime stories for their children, and the kind of happiness that comes from choosing each other every single day. Their love story had started with desperation and a contract, but it had become something beautiful and eternal and real. And that, Julia thought, as Ben kissed her under the starlight, was the very best kind of happily ever after.